Successful Minds with Patricia Baronowski-Schneider, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Successful Minds with Patricia Baronowski-Schneider is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Patricia Baronowski-Schneider.
Hello and welcome back to Successful Minds. I'm your host, Patty Baronowski-Schneider. Today I'm joined by Enda Ndungu of the Oak Pen. So thank you for joining us, Enda. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Well, thank you, Patricia. It's actually Enda Ndungu, but I make fun with a lot of people and kind of say, I can't spell it phonetically, so I don't blame you. You actually tried. Yeah, that was a great trial. Oh, thank you, Patricia. So I'm Enda, right? Obviously. So I'm from Kenya, right? So a lot of people, see my name and they're like, wait, they're kind of trying to place it. So yes, I'm from Africa, beautiful continent, sunny, great weather, no snow.
Nice.
Yay. Yeah.
Yes.
So a little about my business. So I have a passion for, helping people just get their message out.
Okay.
And the background of this is, I realized that there were a lot of great services out there, but people didn't use them because they didn't know about them. And I do have a special place in my heart, I guess, for coaches and consultants, right? Because the right information can change lives, right? So that's where I'm coming from. It's like, yeah, more people need to know about. So that's how I found myself, doing the thing that I do.
Okay, wonderful. So now tell us what inspired you to become a marketing strategist and a persuasion architect. So tell us a little bit about that and what inspired you to do this.
Right. So funny story. Okay, maybe not so funny because a lot of people have probably gone through this. My background is actually in finance, right? So, I'd done the thing, the MBA, the qualifications, financial analyst, all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, this job, by all means on paper looks great. But, the environment was kind of toxic. And it was like, at first, you're like, oh, I can make this work. I will stick it out, This is the right thing to do, right? We kind of rationalize that. And when I couldn't rationalize it anymore, which was, mostly due to health reasons, because even, my body was like, no, you cannot do this. You need to get out, stat. Yeah. And so I had to think, okay, cool. So I got out and I'm a planner. So I'm like, yeah, but what am I supposed to do? I don't have a plan. Like, this is very unlike me. And, like I said, the right information can change lives. And that is, it was meeting, say, that kind of coach that actually got me through the transition, because most of the times you're very, you're kind of in the middle of the weeds. Nothing makes sense. And it's like, I don't know where to go from here, but kind of meeting the right person and having the right information makes all the difference. And so I started thinking, oh, great, I can actually help more businesses get known for their amazing products and services. And the question was, how do I go about that? I make fun and say, Google is your friend. Yeah. So I kind of got on Google and I'm like, well, at the time, I the one thing I was very sure of was I did not want to have a boss, right? I kind of wanted to work with clients, where we were helping each other to achieve mutual goals. And, I kind of said one thing and, that led me to then being a marketing strategist. And I call it a persuasion architect, although the world at large kind of knows it as a copywriter, right?
Right. Okay. That's clever, though.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically salesmanship in print. We're kind of selling stuff on paper. Right. But I call myself a persuasion architect because you're kind of building out, you're designing this thing. You're not just writing random things. You're kind of designing this thing with, you have this design in mind and you're like, well, how do we bring it to life? So That's basically the short version of that. Yeah.
Nice. No, I mean, it is, I love the wording. I mean, really, because people would say, I don't get it, but that is actually a great description of what it is you're doing. And it is true how, sometimes we need somebody, like I always use the term, hang out with people smarter than yourself, bounce ideas off of people and whatnot. And no matter how many years experience you have or how good you are at what you do, sometimes you just need somebody to hold your hand and tell you, do it this way, so that's awesome if you got that help from someone and now you're like, all right, now I want to give that back, so that's really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. Now, what advantages does your approach to marketing have over the traditional methods?
So the way I see it is, alignment, right? So my thing is alignment, that whatever you're doing is aligned to your core vision, right? And so it's very easy as a business person to show up, when you're not in the whole fake it till you make it, right? Because even if we don't admit it, that kind of leaks through, right? Like, people kind of say like, are you very sure about what you're talking about? Like, I don't buy it, right? The other thing is, with, so for example, like in America, the FTC, comes, when a company sort of, makes false claims or, things like that, right? So you kind of want to have your marketing in line with, not necessarily boring or whatever else, but also kind of not getting in the crosshairs of the FTC or, the kind of people that can shut you down, right? Like you kind of want to have a sustainable business. And so those are the advantages, that they're not out there and loud. And while they may be subtle, at the end of the day, you end up making more money.
Right.
Because you don't have to pay lawyers or stuff. More people will buy from you, not because you spent large amounts of money, but because they feel the authenticity and that you actually want to serve them. You actually want to meet their needs. So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And even with the, legalities and things like that, I would say, like with a company, focus on what you do best. You know your business better than anybody. Focus on that. Leave the nitty gritty things like that to people who know what they're doing, because you don't have time to juggle it all. So, you know, it's like anybody, if you're a programmer, that's what you do, let somebody else market it because they know the audience better than you. So that's actually really cool.
Yeah. And I actually use this example, I will make fun and say, you don't go to the doctor and kind of say, oh, I had a headache and I think I have this. And in fact, I'm prescribing myself one, because it kind of it's about, like, you don't know. It could be any number of things, but, and you're probably not the best placed. You may know what the symptoms are. You may know where the pain is, all of that, but you're probably not the best place to know exactly what it could be. So,
you leave that to the professionals, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Good explanation.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are trying to create a business that reflects their values?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I will start with understand your values first, right? What do you stand for? Do you know? Is what you're doing actually in opposition of what your values are? So, for example, I'll use, say, one value of mine. So one of my values is freedom, right? But how that is expressed could be different for any number of people.
Right.
So the question then becomes, does your business reflect the values you have? Because if it doesn't, usually it will be a drag. It's like, oh my God, I have to do this again, because you're doing everything, whatever you're doing, irrespective of what it is, no matter how big or small it is, you're kind of going against like who you actually are, right? So my thing is get to know what your values are, because then based on your values, then if everything comes from that, it feels easier. The other thing I would say is the vision will not make sense to others because the vision was given to you. Right. So you come, you tell your loved ones, oh, I have this great idea to start this kind of business, or to create this sort of business that does X, Y, and Z. And everyone tells you, well, that's impossible. Get your head out of the clouds, all that stuff. Right. So it's, you have to understand, well, the vision was given to you. And so only you can see, what it is and you then have that drive to, make it happen, right? The other thing I would say is accept that there will be challenges. It will suck at times.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of people don't talk about this, but it will suck, right? Like there are days you'll be like, oh my God, like, right? Like, this feels harder than where I was before, right? And I, at this point, and I've lived through this, so I say, go back to your why. Why are you doing this? And your why usually will be connected to your values, right? Say, for example, maybe you created a certain business so that you could have more time with your family, for example. Go back to that and say, okay, this is why I created, this business, and that's my value. So, maybe making 30 million a month is not really my value, right? So what is my value? Like, what do I want to get out of this, that also supports what I believe in. So I think those are the 3 main things I would say about that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, how do you help ambitious coaches, consultants, and course creators spread their message and reach their desired audience?
Well, a number of ways, right? So it will be different for every business because, like every business is different. So the first thing is, I will look at your vision, like, in the best case scenario, what do you see? How would you like this business of yours to end up, right? Because then that kind of builds the foundation for any strategies that we are creating need to align with that vision. So, for example, if you don't have a vision of having this huge business, $1 million company, blah, 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 right? If that's not your vision, then, it doesn't make sense to create big, bold strategies that get you there. That's not what you want, right? So the second thing is, creating the kind of messaging that aligns with your vision. So what would you like your audience to know about you, right? What are some of the things you'd like to tell them? And once we establish that, then the other thing is saying, okay, so this is what you want to tell them. How do we tell them? Are we going to write a random email? Will you do a live on Facebook? That kind of thing. And again, this will usually, I will think about, how best you show up, right? What isn't a struggle to you, like, based on your personality, so that, you kind of show up more easily. Then the other thing is, I kind of look at the data, right? So maybe you did, you did a live and so many people watched it, it probably went viral. Does that speak to something, that your audience wants to see more of, or, some of their pain points and that they'd like to, have you help them with, right? So it's kind of looking at the data and saying, oh, let's see what this is all about. And also looking at the insights. So what is that data telling us? Can we find creative ways to kind of, bring whatever insights we're getting to life? Yeah. So that's mostly, yeah.
Nice. And it is funny because a lot of times you need that outside person, because a company themselves, sometimes I talk to companies and they feel my story is A, B, and C, and everybody knows that. But then when you talk to them, they're like, that's not what I got. Like, really? So tell me, like, they need that outside person to say, you're not telling the message the right way, because when you talk, I'm thinking this. Meanwhile, you do something completely opposite. And again, that's where the professionals come in, and even with like how to tell the story, people, especially nowadays with digital marketing and all that, people just say, I just want the whole world to know about me. But where is your target audience? Where are they located? Like, there's a lot involved in that. And, so they need people on the outside to help them do that. I always say, focus on what you do best. Let me handle everything.
One of the interesting lines that I hear a lot from my clients, you will tell them something and they're like, oh, I didn't think of it like that. But
they need that.
And yet whatever you said, wasn't this big, huge thing. It was just, to you, it was like, oh yeah, by the way, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh my God, wow. So truly.
So now, what should entrepreneurs consider when choosing the right marketing strategies for the business?
It's interesting. When it comes to marketing, usually they're all this, like, this is the next big thing, go on TikTok, you will make money, like there's always this thing and this tactic, right? But again, like I've said, I kind of go to the foundations, and like, I've mentioned before. So one of the things I say is personality, right? So, for example, not all mediums will match your personality. And even like for myself, right? Like, you will not find me doing Facebook Lives because it's like, that's just not much. Yeah. So it's what matches your personality, if you use a certain medium, will that help you show up better, right? So that's one of the things. And also where, if it's a thing that is necessary to do, but you may not be able to do it, then that is where I come in, right? Because there are certain mediums where it's like, yeah, well, this is also great for your audience, so you may not be able to kind of avoid that. The second thing is, the target audience. So how would they like to hear from you, right? So for example, if you're speaking to investors, they're not on TikTok. Right. If you're a consultant, they're not on TikTok, right? But if you are, kind of speaking to the general public or Gen Z or whatever, they will be on TikTok. So it's kind of knowing, where do your people hang out, and then doing what needs to be done. The other thing I ask entrepreneurs to consider is business infrastructure, right? So we could come up with this big, bold strategy, but, you don't have the setup to kind of see it through. So I will give an example, something as simple as email marketing, right? It's not just as simple as sending an email. You have to track the emails. Who was it sent to, right? What group in the audience, responded best or didn't respond, right? All the stuff. So is your business infrastructure set up for you to actually follow through with a strategy and actually track, the results of, said strategy? And the last one I would say is, can you handle fulfillment, right? So we could have the best marketing strategy. You get all kinds of clients, and then you don't know what to do with them, right? Like, and usually, then that will be a problem. So it's, if we do this thing, can you handle the potential upswing in your clients, right? So because obviously we're thinking best case scenario. So if this thing works, can you handle, all these clients that you will get? So yeah, those are the main 4 things that I look at.
Nice. I mean, and these are all important stuff that as a, an entrepreneur, not having, it's kind of like when I worked for, agencies and companies, and then I branched out on my own. Night and day. Like, there's so many more things involved that you wouldn't have thought of. So same with an entrepreneur, you're now on your own, you're now doing this. And if you're creating something from scratch, there's a lot of things involved in that you probably would have never even thought of. So having someone again on the outside saying, all right, here's some things that you need to consider, and let's check them off the boxes before we venture in, so that you're prepared. Because like you said, if you turn around and this is successful and they now have 50 new clients or customers, and now they're like, wait, but I'm by myself. Well, that's something we should have thought about before. So let's figure out how we'll make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, people think that, it's just the big things, but, I've had clients, someone's like, oh, I don't know what's happening. I don't think people are buying. And then when you kind of look at the page, it's like, well, you're missing a button. You're missing a buy button, right? Like, it's such a small thing, but it's also such a big thing. And like you mentioned, right? Sometimes you just need the outside eye to kind of say, oh, yeah, it's, it's over here. Yeah.
But it is something simple. Like, I remember working with somebody one time, I came in after the fact, and they kept saying, the same with the website, their contact us button on their website, we have no clue where that went to. Because then I was kind of like, really, I was sending tests. No one ever got them. And it's like, you could have had billions of clients for the past, 5 years if somebody checked this, and even having like website links that are just, because it's always evolving and changing. So website links that aren't, so somebody doing like a website review, and there's just so much involved that, really play a big picture in, the end game and having, again,
Yes.
focus on your business. Let me handle these little things because we can make it happen.
Yep. I mean, being a jack of all trades kind of messes with your profits. That is what I can say. Yeah. Now,
what have been some of the most rewarding experience you've had working with clients?
Let me see. So I think one of them was, helping a B2B tech company, right? So I kind of wrote their content. And you know how tech is. It's like, oh my God, we're nodding off, right? Like, it's kind of a struggle to make it interesting. So anyway, I helped them with their content, and they had this really cool tool. It was AI powered, and would help e-commerce sites kind of help their customers find the stuff that they needed faster, right? Nice. So obviously a very good thing. But then, it's like they were not known, right? It's like, it's very, so anyway, I helped them with their content. And, I remember asking, oh yeah, so, how are things going? And, they're like, oh, the sales team has been fielding calls. And it's like, they kind of don't have to sell too much because it's like, everyone already knows, oh yeah, I want your thing, right? So there isn't much, it's more of, the nitty gritty, oh, it will be this much or whatever. But everyone suddenly wanted the thing and they understood how it worked, right? Because, the challenge was there's all this content on their site, but reading through it, it was like, yeah, but I don't understand. What are we talking about? Like
talking layman's terms,
Right. Yeah. So I love the challenge of kind of talking in terms, like you said, layman's terms where, oh, I get what you mean. I see what this is and I see how it can help me. The other rewarding experience was helping an image consultant with her YouTube channel, right? And, she was kind of saying, oh, there's no visibility and no one is, and I was like, well, first of all, you kind of need a tracking tool, an insights tool to kind of tell you who's looking at your stuff, what are they interested in, how do they find you, that kind of thing. And, kind of came up with a YouTube strategy and explained, well, the reason you're not being seen is because of X, Y, and Z. You have the right content, but it's the small things that kind of, can you be found, like if someone searched on YouTube, other words you're using, would they find them using that? So helped her with her YouTube strategy. And, in a few weeks, she's like, oh my God, the viewership is up, I feel like I'm going somewhere. Because before that, she was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And she does have a very interesting service, right? Like it's a service that even I believe in. And I'm like, yeah, everybody should try that. So that was very rewarding. It's like, oh yeah, that it felt good. Nice. I think, yeah. So the third one was, so I have top three. The third one was helping a coach. So she had a membership site for female entrepreneurs, and I was kind of able to do their marketing and write their sales pages and all that stuff, their marketing campaign assets. And, more people joined and more people were helped, in terms of just finding a community of people who get it, right? Like that alone, because when you're in business, you kind of need your tribe, right? Like you kind of need a place where you feel like, oh yeah, these people get it. So yeah, these are my top.
Nice. Very well said.
Yeah.
Now, what services do you offer entrepreneurs who want to create a financial legacy on their own terms?
Okay, so the first one is copywriting and messaging strategy, right? So we look at what you need, what marketing campaign assets you need. So is that email? Is that social media posts, sales letters, whatever, right? Look at, what will help your business the most. The second one is email marketing strategies. So for most of my clients, my observation is, they kind of have the other stuff, but then, email marketing. So I basically help them extract hidden money from their lists, right?
Nice.
I feel very proud when I say that because most of the time, it's kind of underestimated. And then also helping them with their websites, right? So is your online presence, kind of reflecting who you are truly, and is it also giving the right message? And also just advertising campaigns, right? So if you want to do a launch or, this big thing, then we kind of, I kind of come up with, what's the strategy, and also just actually writing the actual marketing assets. And then the final one is social media. So thought leadership and strategic content, right? Mm-hmm. So I can help entrepreneurs with that, if you kind of want to show up more, and, writing a daily post is kind of messing, so I can help with all of that.
Yeah. And it's a start, but it's like so many people with like social media, they're kind of like, well, I post, twice and 3 times a day. That's great. But then what? Like, there's more to it than that. And that's where, again, companies don't have time, or entrepreneurs don't have time because they're focusing on other stuff. But, there's a lot involved in it.
Exactly.
Now, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about marketing?
Oh, I think a big one is marketing is scummy and icky. It's like, you're stealing from people, you're lying to people. And, I remember, when I was in finance, one of the things I struggled with was, how do you sell products that, you don't believe in, right? And that was the key. That was key for me, because I realized, actually, when you believe in a product, it's easy to sell because you know how it can help people. And I tell my clients, think about, come from a place of serving, right? Like you have a product or a service that you want to use to serve, to help people. And when you think about it like that, it would then be, for lack of a better term, unethical on your end to not tell people about it, right? Like, it's this thing that could help them. And, you think telling them about it is a bad thing, so when you kind of frame it like that, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So it's probably not so scummy and icky after all. The other misconception is that it's easy, right? So, people assume, it's all about words. Anyone can write a post. You don't need any special skills. Well, on the surface, it feels like that, but it's not, right? Because marketing is actually it's actually a science and a numbers game, right? So it's not just that you wrote a couple of words. You wrote words, first of all. And the other thing is, it actually has psychology involved in it. So just because you wrote the words doesn't mean they will reach the people that you're seeking to reach, right? So it's not actually easy. But once you do get the skill and you work at it, then, it becomes a thing, and, a good thing to have.
Right.
The other misconception is that, it's optional in business. Right. But then I say, people will say, some products, people buy without an email. Well, word of mouth is also marketing. Right. So if you tell your friend, I went to this doctor, they're great, you should try them. That is marketing. And so there's always some type of marketing involved, in a business to make it and keep it successful. Right. Yeah. So, I say that, sometimes, people feel like, I do not want to invest in this, but it's very essential that you do invest in it, because it does help your business.
Yeah. I mean, it's 100% correct. And, it is, people don't realize that it is a process, because, I had people who right off the bat, I just want to be on the cover of Forbes magazine, make it happen. It doesn't work like that. And even if you have this great business, so does everybody else. So how do you stand out from the crowd? And it's not a 1, 2, 3 thing. I always say, unless you've developed a cure for cancer, you're just one of millions of companies. So you have to build that trust, build that momentum, get people. They don't just, suddenly, it's not like you just came out with these like new Air Jordans or something like that. People have to get to know you, get to learn you. Or even if you have the most beautiful sneakers, Is the quality good? What makes you better than them? What's your return policy? There's just so much involved.
Yep.
And people don't realize that it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but get your story straight, work with the right people, and you might have a few hiccups along the way, and that's fine, but eventually you're going to get there,
Yeah, absolutely. You said it right. Yeah.
So now, what are some of the key elements that entrepreneurs need in order to create a successful business?
So on this one, I think I will talk about the stuff that people don't talk about,
Okay.
because people will talk about businessy things.
Right.
But I will start with, I think as an entrepreneur, you need to have a solid mindset. And, that can sound like such a fluffy, thing to say. But for me, a solid mindset is just believing that you can do it and believing in your vision, right?
Right.
Because without that, even with the best tactics, you're kind of the best strategies, you're kind of going nowhere without that. So, that's a big one for me. And, I've actually also experienced it because like you mentioned, there will be hiccups. So what do you do on those weird days? What do you do when, you're kind of wondering, why am I here? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is, they should have a great foundation. And one of this great foundation, like, I probably mentioned earlier in the podcast, is what is their why? What is your why? Why did you start this thing? Why did you have this desire to start your business? Right. So when they're in the middle of doubt, when it's one of those strange days, kind of go back and say, well, why did I start this? Maybe you wanted to help people. Maybe you just wanted a different way of life, whatever it is, go back, right? Because that probably hasn't changed. You didn't, wake up and suddenly want to become a super villain,
Right.
so you're no longer interested in helping people, right?
Right.
You probably are still interested in helping people. So, kind of go back to that. And the other thing is find your tribe. So entrepreneurship can be a very lonely journey. And unless you've kind of walked it, right, people wouldn't understand. So someone who's had a 9-to-5 job all their life won't get it. They will not understand why, you wake up in the middle of the night going like, where am I getting my next client from? Right. Like, so then it's like, you're losing sleep over that. Yeah, because I got to pay my bills. So find a tribe that, kind of understands what your challenges are, kind of, gets the big deal when you have certain wins, because they're like, oh yeah, we know what it takes, to kind of get to a certain level.
Right.
And I usually say, you're not really an eagle if you're kind of hanging out with chickens. Like, you really become an eagle when you hang out with other eagles, right? So absolutely, find your tribe. And the final one I would say is, like I mentioned before, your values are everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you could scale your business and then decide no, right? Like, you kind of discover at the end that, oh no, this is not what I wanted. On paper, you seem very successful, but it's not what you wanted. And it actually, trying to create this successful business actually robbed you of the very things that were actually very important to you. So, it's good to know, what you stand for, and figure out what's valuable to you, because then you kind of then define, well, what does success mean to me? Is it working 4 hours a week? Is it having $10 million in the bank? Like, what does success mean to me? And once you define what success means to you, then, it's easier to kind of navigate, right? Because we live in a world that tells us, unless you have millions in the bank, that's the only way you can be happy. And that's the only definition of success. But the reality is we all have different definitions of success. And so it's figuring out, what success means to you.
Right. Like you say, make it personal, because if you just follow what's online and blah, 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 because we all know the internet never lies. I mean, if you just follow all of that, you're going to be reaching for, I don't want to say reaching for something that you'll never achieve, because you never know, but just be realistic,
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. So now, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are just starting out on their business?
the first thing is jump, just do it, and it will freak you out. You will be, there will be so many what ifs, right? But the thing I've even learned on my own journey is you won't know the entire plan until you start walking it. And even when you start walking it, you kind of know only like 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, and then the rest is, it could go either way, right? But then the great thing is, as you kind of walk that path, you discover more opportunities, and you're like, oh yeah, I would never have known that this was even a possibility if I'd never started. So I think starting is the hardest part, kind of leaving your comfort zone and, just deciding that my dream, your dream and your vision is worth fighting for. I think that's the biggest, that's the most important part. The other thing would be to, I guess, get comfortable with the unknown.
Right.
You won't always know, and it can be annoying. I can testify it can be annoying, but, kind of getting comfortable with that, because the unknown can also be, good things, right? Yeah. You could look back and go like, wow, I would never be here, if I hadn't taken that first step. So
right.
yeah, that's what I have to say.
Start somewhere.
Yep, exactly.
Anything else you want to talk about? Tell about, all that you're doing and all that good stuff. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so I always welcome people who want help with their marketing and, creating marketing campaigns. I'm always saying, yeah, absolutely. Come in. I would love to help you. Because my motto is serve, right? So I want to help people. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love money, but absolutely. I love serving people. So I think that's it for now. You can find me at theoakpen.com. Also find me on LinkedIn by Googling Enda Ndungu. The spelling of the name might be a bit tricky, but you will find me. I'm almost sure I'm kind of the only one on there, but yeah. Yes.
Nice. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Enda Ndungu of the Oak Pen. So thanks for listening to Successful Minds by Patty B. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the show. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Successful Minds with your host, Patricia Baronowski-Schneider. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.